Coming up today, succumbing to intense pressure from party members loyal to President Park Geun-hye, the floor leader of Korea's ruling party Yoo Seong-min reluctantly steps down. Korea's minimum wage will rise more than 8% next year to roughly $5.30 an hour. Plus, with uncertainties over Greece, the US Federal Reserve says it wants to see more signs of improvement before it begins raising interest rates. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, July 9th here in Seoul. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, bowing to days of intense pressure from party officials loyal to the president. The floor leader of the ruling Saenuri Party, Yoo Seong-min, stood down from his post on Wednesday, announcing his resignation at the National Assembly. Yoo took a final parting shot at the administration. Park Ji-won reports.
In tendering his resignation on Wednesday, Yoo Seong-min apologized to the public for disappointing them and causing confusion within the party. But he said he had stayed in the post to defend the values of a democratic republic, which could be read as a jab at the presidential office and those who had pressured him to step down.
The law, principles, justice. These precious values stemming from Article 1 of the Constitution, which states that Korea is a democratic republic, are what I wanted to protect, even at the risk of my political career.
He resigned after accepting the result of a general meeting on the matter called by the party earlier in the day. Party lawmakers finally reached a consensus after hours of discussion, and the decision was made after a full debate, not a vote, to minimize the potential for further internal conflict. The final call to end the debate was made by party leader Kim Moo-sung.
We've heard enough from our lawmakers at the meeting, and I am now going to inform Yoo Seong-min of the result.
The ruling party's Supreme Council said it had convened a meeting to end the continuing strife between the president and the floor leader. The conflict began when President Park vetoed a revision to the National Assembly Act late last month, which she criticized Yoo for spearheading. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party lambasted the result, calling it a shameful moment in Korea's political history. They blamed the presidential office for the current deadlock at the assembly and for creating the rift within the ruling party. In commenting on Yoo's resignation, presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-wook expressed a wish for good relations with the ruling party down the road, but declined to comment further. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And Korea's main opposition party has reintroduced a bill containing revisions to the National Assembly law, which President Park Geun-hye co-signed back in 1998 when she was a lawmaker. The New Politics Alliance for Democracy argues the old revisions are essentially the same as the most recent ones, which the president vetoed. The party also named the bill after the president, drawing criticism from the presidential office. Explaining her recent veto, President Park said giving Parliament the power to request changes to government decrees would have been unconstitutional. Korea's minimum wage for next year has been set at 6,031 an hour, or roughly $5.30. That's up 8.1% from this year. The Minimum Wage Council reached a deal at its 12th meeting late Wednesday. It was only attended by 16 members of government bodies and employers' associations. All 9 labour union members walked out of the vote in opposition. They had been pushing for a minimum wage of slightly over $7 an hour. In their absence, 15 of the 27 members voted in favour of the agreed deal. Now, as a result, minimum wage workers will earn a monthly salary of roughly 1.26 million won, or $1,108 if they work 40 hours a week. The Employment and Labour Minister will finalise the minimum wage by August 5th. The US Federal Reserve says it needs to see more positive data before it raises rates from near zero, especially given the concerns over Greece. According to the minutes of a June policy meeting, which were released on Wednesday local time in the US, most Fed officials said they were worried that a failure to resolve the Greek debt crisis could result in disruptions in financial markets in the euro area, with possible spillover effects on the US. That said, most officials said they believed it was almost time to start normalizing US monetary policy. This leads most economists to believe that, despite the ongoing issues in Greece and the tanking Chinese stock market, the Fed still plans to raise its key interest rate in September. The Fed has kept rates near zero ever since the height of the 2008 global financial crisis. And China's stock markets have been taking some solid hits for the past couple of weeks, with the main stock exchange in Shanghai plunging by around a third since mid-June. Now, this has investors on edge, with some saying the real economic issue facing the world right now is China's bursting stock bubble, not the debt crisis in Greece. But one person who doesn't seem overly concerned is US Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew. On Wednesday, he played down the potential global impact of China's stock market rout, stressing it posed no immediate threat to the US economy, adding that China's markets are still pretty much separated from world markets. US officials said the main issue is that it could slow the pace of market reforms in China if things don't stabilize. Turning now to the latest on the outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome here in the nation, and Korea reported its first MERS deaths in just over a week on Wednesday, but fortunately no new cases of the virus have been reported in a few days now. Kim Hyun-bin has the latest.
2 people died from MERS on Wednesday, raising the death toll to 35. The health ministry said Wednesday that 2 people had been in what it deemed a high-risk group. They were the first deaths from the disease in 8 days. One of the deceased was a 50-year-old with a pre-existing condition, while the other was a person in his 70s who was at risk because of his old age. The ministry added that of the 35 deaths from the disease so far, 32 had been elderly people or people with pre-existing conditions such as diabetes and cancer, which apparently worsened because of the virus. On a more positive note, there have been no new infections reported over the past 3 days, leaving the total number of people diagnosed with the disease at 186. Of that, 32 remain hospitalized, while 119 have been discharged following full recoveries. Since the MERS outbreak on May 20th, over 16,500 people have been put into isolation for possible infection. Roughly 15,800 people have been released so far, after not showing any symptoms of the disease during its 14-day incubation period, placing the number of people still under quarantine at 811. MERS was first reported in Saudi Arabia in 2012 and had a fatality rate of 40% until the outbreak in Korea. With the latest deaths, the fatality rate of MERS in Korea has risen to a little less than 19%. There's no vaccine or cure for the disease. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea has expressed regret over North Korea's threat to cancel a planned visit to Pyongyang by former South Korean First Lady Lee Hee-ho. Seoul's Unification Ministry says it will continue to support Lee's planned trip despite the regime's warning. North Korea's Asia-Pacific Peace Committee, which is involved in talks for Lee's visit, claims South Korean media is falsely accusing Pyongyang of using Lee's planned trip for political reasons. The widow of former President Kim Dae-jung is scheduled to make a 4-day humanitarian trip to the north from August 5th. Now, a new survey shows South Koreans would really love to have more children, but having them and raising them is a different story, as the financial burden can be far too much for some parents. And that's where many say the government should come in. But are they really doing enough? Son Jung-in reports.
The Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs released a report on Wednesday on the value of children. It analyzed the result of a survey on more than 18,000 respondents from 8 countries, including the United States, China, Britain, Japan, and Korea. The questions were divided into positive and negative categories, asking respondents to rate their level of agreement on a scale of 1 to 5 on statements related to parents' happiness, social standing, financial burden, and career chances. Koreans showed an ambivalent attitude on the survey, rating highly on both opposing categories. They strongly agreed that watching children grow up was life's greatest joy, with a score of 4.26 points. They also shared the view that having children increases people's social standing in society, with 3.17 points, the second highest following Sweden. However, at the same time, Koreans strongly believed that children were a financial burden and interfered too much with their freedom, recording the third and second highest score respectively among the countries surveyed. Officials at the institute said that while the country's birth rate stands at just 1.24 children per woman, Koreans' ideal number of children was 2.7, meaning they want more kids but are restricted by the financial burden of raising them. The officials added that Korean government should strengthen its measures to lessen the economic burden of child rearing in order to boost the birth rate. 손정인, Arirang News.
And Korea's chronically low birth rate and its aging population means we are going to see the number of people in Korea decline sharply over the coming decades. For more on the possible implications for the country and its economy, Connie Kim reports.
Korea currently has the 27th largest population in the world, but that number is expected to slip to 49th by 2060. Statistics Korea said Wednesday the Korean population, currently at 51 million, will reach its peak in the next 15 years, jumping by about a million. And then it'll decline, going down to as low as 44 million by 2060. The agency expects a portion of the elderly population to increase by more than threefold in the coming years, while the working age population ratio will decrease to nearly 50%. The agency attributes the shift to the chronically low birth rate and rapidly aging society, with experts expressing concern that the decrease in the number of young people will have a negative effect on the workforce.
The decrease in the workforce will dent the country's growth rate. At the same time, it's going to burden the younger generation, as they will have to shoulder the cost of the rise in the aging population.
Similarly, the Hyundai Research Institute predicts a rise in the aging population will cause the growth rate to fall, and it puts the figure in the 0% range by 2060. And to resolve the problem, the Korea Development Institute says society and the government must work together to find ways to support the elderly while seeking new growth engines for the economy. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, tensions between Korea and Japan are bubbling to the surface again as Tokyo is already backpedaling on its admission that it forced Koreans into slave labor at some of its wartime industrial sites that were recently bestowed UNESCO World Heritage status. An official from Japan's foreign ministry told Seoul-based Yonhap News on Wednesday that the expression "forced to work" in the English language translation of its statement to the World Heritage Committee does not mean Tokyo acknowledges the use of forced labor. This follows similar remarks made by Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida a couple of days before. Korea and Japan had earlier reached an agreement on the issue following months of negotiations. Microsoft has announced plans to cut 7,800 jobs, or nearly 7% of its workforce. The company says most of the job cuts will be in its underperforming phone hardware unit, which has been struggling against its rivals Apple and Google. The company also said it will take an impairment charge of $7.6 billion related to its acquisition of Nokia's handset business for more than $7 billion, in addition to a restructuring charge ranging between $750 million and $850 million. Now, this is the second round of job cuts since Satya Nadella took over as chief executive back in February 2014, and it follows its massive slash of 18,000 jobs just last July. The cuts and charges are expected to be complete by the end of June 2016. Arirang TV, the channel you're watching right now, will launch a 24-hour news channel at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. The global broadcaster has already pre-tested its service on the in-house network, just days ahead of the official start. Kwon So-ah has the details.
Arirang TV is just a step away from expanding its broadcasting service into another realm. Beginning next week, it'll be the first Korean UN in-house network channel. On Wednesday, a congratulatory event was held at Arirang Tower in Seoul ahead of the official launch.
Without the United Nations, it would have been difficult for South Korea to become independent. As this year marks the 70th anniversary of the UN's founding, it's very meaningful for Arirang TV to become part of its network, representing Korea.
The broadcaster will join around 20 other news channels, including CNN International, BBC World, Al Jazeera, and NHK, and be viewed on screens at the UN headquarters. In this way, Arirang TV will be able to more actively inform UN employees, diplomats, and the international community about Korea's history, foreign policies, inter-Korean issues, and more. The Arirang TV UN channel will differentiate its programming from the existing Arirang TV world, putting greater focus on news and current affairs. A special launching program will kick off on July 14th at 10 a.m. in New York or 11 p.m. in Seoul. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you as always for tuning in, and we do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.